Campaign season is heating up for the 2016 nomination for both parties. Let's take a look at some of the rhetoric floating around. And folks, when I say rhetoric, I don't mean that in a demeaning way. Successful politicians, successful leaders have to communicate effectively through words. So I don't mean that as some sort of knock, but I was struck by something that Rick Perry said in the last few days. And by the way, I do think that Rick Perry has gotten a bit of a bad rap. I do believe when you look back in the last campaign, his oops moment, it came from the severe back pain he was in, the surgery he'd had, the fact that he was not sleeping. And any of you who have ever gone without a night or two of sleep knows it's hard to remember your own name. Anyway, I don't want it to seem like I'm just picking on Rick Perry for partisan reasons, but here's something that jumped out. He was speaking to a crowd, and here he was criticizing President Obama. Nothing wrong with criticizing an incumbent president or the opposite party if you're running for president. You have to do that. But he says, we've got to move past, quote, 8 years of this young, very attractive, amazing orator, junior U.S. senator. Now, I can certainly understand in 2008 mocking Obama as a junior senator who's a good speaker, because he frankly hadn't accomplished much. Who does accomplish much in just a couple of years in the United States Senate? But here we are in the 7th year of the Obama presidency, and to still be discounting him as somehow essentially unqualified to be president is just fatuous. I certainly don't remember in the 7th year of the Reagan presidency that Democrats running for office tried to demean Reagan. I'm not saying they didn't criticize him, but they didn't constantly say he's not qualified to be president because he's just an actor. They focused their criticism on actual policy, Iran-Contra, things like that. They actually talked about real policies. And that's why I think that this is a little bit bizarre of Rick Perry. I'm sure it does play to certain Republican audiences, but it doesn't exactly create a rhetorical framework that helps you build momentum for a general election if, for example, Perry were to get the nomination. Politics, you have to criticize your opponent. I understand that, but the more the criticisms seem legitimate, the better. I mean, the 7th year of the George W. Bush presidency, you really didn't hear that many candidates for president constantly demeaning George Bush as somebody who was a daddy's boy who'd never accomplished anything in his life. Because, in fact, he'd been president for 7 years. They were focusing their disagreements on policy. And here's the thing, and I realize I'm going to upset some of you. Some of you don't like it if I ever say anything good about a Republican. Some of you don't like it if I say something good about a Democrat. But here's the thing about the so-called inexperience rap on Obama as it relates to his policies. I defy you to name a specific policy that Obama has picked that the most seasoned Democratic veterans, any of his opponents in 2008, wouldn't have also backed. You could talk about Obamacare all you want. That was the consensus of the Democratic Party, and that's where all the Democrats were headed. So there wasn't anything in particular about his lack of experience that ended up with a policy. You might not like the policy, but it became the mainstream, and it was the mainstream of the Democratic Party. So my only point is, candidates of both parties, when you're making attacks on your opponents, the more they seem grounded in something real, something that doesn't seem completely frivolous, something that doesn't seem just complete hack-like, the better off you are, and the more credible you'll seem in a general election when you've got to be doing the same thing.